Welcome to another episode of One Miss Pod. I'm your host, Zack Long, and I'm joined as always by the lovely Kelly Warner.
Hi.
How are you doing this fine, well, I can't say evening, this fine night?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
No, it's 1:43 in the morning. I'm about to talk about a film I may or may not remember. I think I'm doing quite good. So one of the things that we wanted to try to do here on our third episode now is start to build a little bit more of a structure. And whenever you start out a new podcast, you kind of go from having a sort of structureless protoplasma into slowly over each episode, you kind of refine it, you find out what works. So one of the things that we're going to do is start to introduce that structure and start by saying, Kelly, what have you been up to this week?
Staring into the pit of despair. But other than that, I've been trying to get some writing done and seeing a couple good movies. How about yourself?
Oh, I haven't done very much writing for myself because that's what I do for a living right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see one good movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I only say one good movie, not because I saw like 10 crappy ones. No, I've only seen one movie since last time. Not counting the one we talk about today. And that was a Red Line. It's an animated feature. The director, I'm blanking on his name, but he was responsible for one of the parts of Animatrix. But even more so, he actually contributed key animations or supervised animations for some of my favorite late 80s, early 90s anime, such as Goku Midnight Eye, Doomed Megalopolis, Demon City Shinjuku, and a bunch of those really really grimy, gritty, dark ones that came out of that period. But those don't reflect Redline. Redline is pure adrenaline action, feel good. There's so much violence, but nobody dies. Except, well, only 3 people die in like all of the violence that happens.
Yeah, I saw that years ago and I loved it. Yeah.
Oh, I watched it on Tubi and then immediately went out and bought it, and it's shipping to me already.
As far as good movies I've seen recently, finally caught one of last year's better reviewed movies, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It was very good, very gay. I liked it. Recommend.
So you already know Redline, just for the audience in case they want to see it. It's about badass like space racing insanity. But I don't actually know anything about Portrait of a Lady on Fire. What is that one about?
Okay, so it's French. But it's a film about a woman painter that is hired to paint the portrait of a rich and very socially secluded young woman, and it's like her first painting of her really doesn't capture her, and so she like keeps on redoing it, and they grow closer over time and stuff. It's a lesbian movie, but it's good. It's coming out. It's streaming now on Hulu, and it's coming to Criterion Blu-ray in July.
I mean, Criterion Blu-ray is a pretty good sign. Though it does. I want to ask one question. Is it better or worse than my favorite lesbian movie, which was it the Housemaid or the Chambermaid? The Housemaid, wasn't it?
The Handmaiden, the Chan-wook Park.
Yes, thank you, Handmaiden.
Well, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot less exploitational and thriller. It's more of a drama romance than a thriller romance. So it's a different sort of movie, even though they're still, girls kissing.
The fun thing about The Handmaiden actually is like it's really the exploitation aspects of it feel kind of tagged on
a little bit. Yeah,
they don't really have the same like. It doesn't really mesh with the rest. Like most of that film is a just kind of cute love story with a bit of a twist to it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Yeah, I feel like some of it. Now, I don't know the novel it's based on, so I don't know how much is It's not even a Korean novel. I think the novel is The Fingersmith. I'm not sure
Oh,
about that.
I did read about that. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't a Korean novel. I do remember that
So
actually.
I can't say how much of the movie is Park and how much of the movie is the original author, but I
I'm
would.
going to guess that the octopus is Park.
Yes, exactly. The octopus has to be Park. It just has to be.
I do like. Let's not get into spoilers, but I do like the ending and what happens in that room.
No, that
I
I
think
love
that
the
it had
ending.
a
I do.
very clever ending to it,
hmm
which I would definitely. I mean, this isn't what I was recommending. I would recommend Redline, but I'd also recommend The Handmaiden.
and so now we are going to move on to new titles available or news. And you had a little bit of a news announcement about a new release coming up.
Yeah, so this is a little bit early because this comes out on July 3rd, but I am very excited to see what Netflix does with their new Ju-on TV series. And Ju-on, of course, you know, but I mean, I imagine our audience does, but it's The Grudge.
Yeah, The Grudge. Grudge TV series. Do you know if Takashi Shimizu is involved?
I do not know. I did not specifically see his name,
Mm,
but I just scanned it briefly. I saw his name mentioned as like he started the
right,
series,
yeah.
as in the film series. So I don't think he is, but I don't want to be quoted on that.
Okay.
I'll
All
check
right.
before our next episode, and we can
Okay.
do corrections.
Yeah, or, I mean, we got a ways to go until July.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the cool thing about this one though is it's called Ju-on Origins,
hmm,
and it actually it posits a very interesting idea. It's it takes the world of the Grudge and it says this is a real event, and like what is the history behind like multiple decades of this cursed house.
that's kind of cool, actually.
That could work, especially when you consider that the Grudge movies all kind of follow the same thing:
hmm
person enters house, person dies.
hmm
So you can either do individual episodes of how somebody dies, or you could really build up the mystery, and that's what I think they'll do. But
Yeah.
you could really build up that mystery and really kind of explore it, which then risks it then like has the risk of sort of over explaining, which with the
hmm
Japanese horror aesthetic, like one of the things that they do a lot is cut great swaths of scenes out. And when that happens, there's a lot of moments where like it doesn't make sense. For a great example, why in the Ring is there a video? Why in Ringu? In the Ring, it explains it, but it doesn't in Ringu. There's
mm
no reason that there should be a ghost video. It's just one of those things where it's almost scarier that it just is.
mm.
And so hopefully this doesn't do it. Though it's coming to Netflix, which means we'll both have access, so maybe we'll
Right.
do a couple episodes on it.
That'd be cool, yeah. Also, in addition to news and announcements like that, I'm going to be trying to find newly available Asian horror titles streaming or on Blu-ray. And I say Asian horror, not Japanese horror, because sometimes the pickings are going to be slim, and so we're just going to try to give you what we can.
Plus, like if you're a fan of of Japanese horror, you're probably a fan of Asian horror.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, sure. That's a good assumption to make, right? We don't know when
I
this
think
episode is going to air, so these releases might be available for a while now. By the time you hear this, we'll see. But on Shutter streaming, we have the Shutter exclusive Korean paranormal horror film zero point 0.0 megahertz. I've heard good things. I don't know anything else about it though.
I haven't heard. I've seen the trailers for it in front of some YouTube videos, and it looked really interesting.
Uh,
I don't have Shutter at the moment.
in Blu-ray releases, we now available. We have a steelbook Blu-ray from Sentai Filmworks of Vampire Hunter D,
Yeah, I'm getting me that.
and available May 26th from Arrow Video is the big old box set, Solid Metal Nightmares: The Films of Shinya Tsukamoto. Now, this is not a complete. It says that the films of Shinya Tsukamoto, but it should not be considered the The complete box. It has 10 films, including Tetsuo the Iron Man,
That
Tetsuo
is a good
2.
10 films is a good box though. We have to admit that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The films included are Tetsuo the Iron Man, Tetsuo 2, The Adventure of Denchu Kozu, Tokyo Fist, Bullet Ballet, A Snake of June, Vital, Haze, Kotoko, and Killing.
Um Tokyo Fist, is that what that was called?
Mm,
That's a great title.
it's a good movie too.
I haven't. You know this. The audience might not. I'm not actually a big Tsutomoto fan, but as of recently, I've started to come around.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
one of the things that did that is a film that isn't even in this box set.
I know, and I'm disappointed about that. Hiroku the Goblin. And I might be pronouncing that wrong. I always get the pronunciation of Hiroku wrong. But yeah, that's not included, and that's too bad because it's a fun film. Also not
Oh,
included as strangely Tetsuo 3, but hey, whatever.
didn't Tetsuo 3 come out like just a few years ago?
Um, it came out further longer ago than, for example, Killing, which is the newest film in the box set. But
I know that
it's
there
newer.
are definitely a lot in that box set that I do want to see. I want to see A Snake in June. I want to see
Hmm.
The Killing,
Oh,
Vital,
I'm I
Kotoko.
I love Tsukamoto. I know that's always been one of the kind of differing things between us. Is I love him, you don't. Yeah, and you're coming around a little bit, but it's still he's my man. And I'm disappointed also about some of the other things that are not in there, like the Nightmare Detective movies or Fires on
Oh
the
yeah, I
Plane
wanted those.
or
Wait,
Gemini.
Fires in the as in the old novel. He did his own adaptation of it.
Yeah, he made a new
'Cause I knew
one.
it
He made
adapted in like 1960 or something.
Yeah, the original was by Koni Chikawa, but yeah, Tsukamoto made a new one in the last decade, and it's supposed to be horrifying and a little bit
I mean, that story should be horrifying.
yeah, yeah. I like the original film. I mean, it's not as horrifying as it probably would be today because it was like whatever, a 50s or 60s movie.
I
So
think I watched it within the last 2 years. I think it holds up.
yeah, no, it's
I think
good. Koni Chikawa,
it
man.
really is a like a harrowing tale. I need that novel.
Yeah, no, that'd be cool. All right. And now we're moving into the topic of the day, the movie, The Secret of the Telegian from 1960.
Okay. Okay, I got this. You need a synopsis? I got you.
Oh no.
So listeners, let's step this back 1 second. We just finished recording One Missed Call 2. It's 4 in the morning. What?
Final. One
Oh,
was called Final.
well, we did two. It was the second podcast. We did them both in the same one.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
But we just got finished talking about the sequels to One Missed Call. 4 in the morning. What time is it? It's time to watch a 1960s Japanese film, and I maybe was a slight bit delirious during this.
You were so annoying. I'm sorry, but it's
That's
true.
okay. I believe that I do, for the most part, understand this film. So here's the synopsis. The film opens with a character that we don't know go into a carnival show. We don't know this character yet. We don't even know that we're supposed to be following this character because a group of people go into the carnival. So they're in a like a cave of horrors show where things are supposed to, people in monster suits come out, but this guy actually ends up being really murdered. This starts a police investigation where we get our police detective. We have an old police detective and we have a young one. Now the young one's important because he is friends with, I can't say main character. He's set up like a main character, but this movie doesn't really have a main character.
The main, but he was a reporter, right?
He was, yeah, it was well, he wasn't just a reporter though. He was a science reporter, which was
Hmm.
very specific, and I think this is the only reason he exists. Otherwise, because he's friends with the young detective, and I think they thought like, well, obviously the detectives get called, but how do we explain the sci-fi stuff? We need a science writer. So this guy gets in, he gets involved with the mystery, and what we find out is that there is a group of men who had, at the end of the Second World War, as Japan was losing, they took they basically, I think they stole gold bars, and if it's not gold bars, they stole money.
It's still gold.
And
It was gold bars, yeah.
it was gold bars. Okay, so they stole gold bars. They quote unquote murdered a soldier that stood up against them and a scientist, and they leave them abandoned in a cave. But when they come back, and this is in dialogue, when they came back, they couldn't find their bodies, so they assumed that they had been crushed. So it turns out that the murders that are happening, that scientist survived. He made a machine that allows teleportation. The soldier survived, though badly wounded, though you don't see that till later, or scarred, sorry. He survived, and he's killing these people in order to get revenge. And essentially, the movie basically ends as soon as he's gotten his revenge, which means that the human bad guys, are down. He's a kaijin, which stands for mysterious person, I believe. And so he kills the human bad guys. Then he ends up dying himself in an accident with his uh, teleporter, which is how he's able to kill people and kind of go anywhere he wants. And then the movie just ends on a grand whimper.
With a volcano.
Yes, and we'll get into that when the time comes. Oh boy!
Yeah.
So, being delirious, how'd I do?
You were pretty close, but I think more attention should be paid to the fact that so much of the teleportation device was a major part of the film, and that this is that the doctor and this soldier survive, and the teleportation device. The doctor has no idea it's being used for ill intent, and the vengeful soldier is now using it to teleport himself into, like locked rooms to kill people and stuff. Like he'll tell people, meet me here, and then they'll be like, oh, freaking out and everything. And then he suddenly appears there and stabs them. And I want to point that out also. He stabs them with a bayonet from the World War II rifles.
Not the first guy though. The first guy, it didn't look like a bayonet. It looked like a sword.
Okay. Well,
I would have to look at their rifles to be able to tell, but I just had rewatched the very start of it because I hadn't remembered it, and it did. It's like a wide blade.
Okay, all right. But it's fairly brutal stabbing, actually, for the time and for Japan,
Yeah.
Toho sci-fi.
Well, the last kill especially is very sadistic.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Because we have these lingering shots of this grown man terrified.
yeah, and I mean, there's this one other stabbing where the dude takes the bayonet and he stabs it into the guy, and he has to push it in, and it's like, yeah, that was like, oh god,
Yes, I do remember that one. Yeah, I don't think the first was a bayonet, but I do remember that.
Yeah. The film has some interesting things going on regarding World War II.
Oh, sorry. I know why the first one wasn't a bayonet, because he left that one in the guy, and if he had left his bayonet, he wouldn't have it.
Okay, there you go.
With the other ones, we see him escape, so he's able to keep it.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on about the war in this film. For example, our main villain, the teleporting man,
The Telegian.
The Telegian. Yeah, we'll get into that. The thing is, in flashback, we see him standing up for the Japanese Empire against people that are, basically taking care of themselves after the war is over, and it's like, this gold is mine. We put in our time. We're going home. And it's kind of interesting where it's like, it asks you to think those people that are, wanting to take care of themselves and set up a future as the villains, and this guy that's standing up for the Japanese Empire is the hero, because then
In
he's
that moment.
in that moment, and then he's killed, and then he becomes the villain. Or he's not really killed, and then he
We
becomes
got to
the
get to
villain,
that in a
the
moment.
Avenger, with a bayonet and a teleporter going around, and it's like, who is the bad guy here, and who is the villain? And the movie has some interesting things going on with the World War II. I mean, there's also even that cabaret club where it's military themed and
Yes.
everything. There and
Yeah, that was one of the parts that was most confusing because it was just suddenly like, wait a second, there's just the military like walking
yeah,
around. It was like, oh no, it's a club. Like, okay,
yeah, but to me, the movie seems to be trying to make you aware again of the war, which,
no, it's absolutely is. Like, I mean, it worked because my first thought when we saw that, I was like, wait a second, when does this take place? And
yeah,
so
and
it's putting you in that time frame.
yeah, and because I mean, it's about the sins of the last days of the war catching up to these men, basically, and it's interesting, but also I don't know if it fully explores that as well as I'd like. But
I don't think that it does, and I don't think that it fully villainizes the Telegian as it should.
no, I was confused for so long whether or not to think of this man as some avenging angel or a devil. And maybe it's kind of interesting that we don't know, but the movie operates in gray for too long.
He wants to like his main goal is murder, and then when he's done murdering, he dies. Now, of course, that's a for one part you go, well, how does the film end? You can't have him escape, but it's very interesting that like technically he survives, but when we're in that flashback, both him and the scientist, the doctor, get shot like 6 times. The guy shoots them, and then we have a shot of him. It's an angle. The camera's facing up to give the main human bad guy a sense of power, and he literally points the gun down at the camera and shoots like 3 or 4 times into this guy. And so by all which is that is why I thought he was dead at first
Hmm.
and that scientists would do it because it's like they loaded him with bullets. But
Hmm.
I kind of think in a way, and this might not work to you, but I kind of think in a way that even though he's alive, I think it still is just a ghost story. I think the only reason he is alive is to serve as a wrath of vengeance.
No, yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, he even his partner, the scientist that built the teleportation machine, is just like totally aghast when he learns that it's being used to kill people. And it's like he didn't know that this man that he had been working with was a monster, and it kind of a specter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest problems with this film, and the scientist, in my opinion, kind of does identify this as well, is that there's too many characters, and characters in this they aren't characters. They are cutouts that exist to move the plot forward.
Oh yeah, they're
And
they're archetypes. There's not a character in this movie.
that was the part that was the thing that actually messed me up the most because we're meeting these people and it's very clear that they're evil. Well, not even evil. It's very clear they're the bad guys
Hmm.
because it's three. Well, one's dead now at the start of the movie, and it's three left who this guy is coming for.
Hmm.
And we meet them, and where they're talking about everything, but we never learn what they do now. We never learn anything about them except for what they did in the past.
Hmm.
Like we could be looking at them, you could tell me he's a banker or a homeless. Well, he wasn't a homeless man; he had a suit. You could tell me he was a banker or a welder, and I couldn't have told you any different.
Yeah,
It,
it's very light on details. Yeah.
it's on. It kind of continues that forward too. And one of the problems is that, like I said, too many characters. Like we
Hmm.
have a young detective and the journalist, but the journalists only exist to help the detective. They're basically the same person, but they needed to say, "Hey, who understands the science?"
And then there's also an older detective too, because sure.
Yeah, because well, I
And
mean, you have Parker, so it makes sense it makes sense in a reality form, but not so much in a narrative form in which you get to choose what goes in. which,
Yeah, and
like, the older
and
detective contributes nothing, and neither does the love interest.
yeah, there's a love interest, and she's basically there to occasionally be carried by the Telegian. Basically, that's it.
Which, why?
To give her flowers and then carry her around. I mean, the
Do
carry
you
her
know
around
her?
shot.
No, that would have been like
No, no,
the
I don't think
1960s.
so.
It was 15 years ago that he was shot.
I don't think
So,
thing
like,
thing is, it just gives you the image that you
of
see
him
in so many.
of him carrying her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like you see in so many of these, like even Universal monster movies of Frankenstein carrying a woman, or something like
actually,
that.
this reminded me a lot of a mix between those Universal films and the American sci-fi of the 1950s.
Yeah, no, I
Which
think
which
that's
actually
on
that makes
target.
a lot of sense because you were telling me just before we started, you were talking about a movement of films from this period. Which could you take over more on that?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so The Secret of the Telegian was part of what was considered a mini subgenre of movies that came out at the
A
time
subgenre.
called the Insubstantial Man movies. It's an odd name, but okay. So so this wave kind of got kicked off with 1949's Enter the Invisible Man, and a lot of them were
Oh, so it was only 11 years before?
yeah, yeah. It did not.
Oh,
This wave did
I didn't
not
realize
last
it was
long.
yeah, I didn't realize it was such a short period.
The Secret of the Telegian was considered the last of a mini genre of movies which were known at the time as Insubstantial Man movies. They began with 1949's Enter the Invisible Man, then continued through with Motoyoshi Oda's The Invisible Avenger from 1954. The actual title in Japan was simply The Invisible Man, but Invisible Avenger is what it got known to be over here. Um, rival studio Daiei tried their hand at it with 1957's Vapor Man Meets the Human Fly. Ishiro Honda, Godzilla
Such a great
father,
time.
the father of Godzilla, Ishiro Honda, joined this Insubstantial Man movement with the H-Man in 1958 and the Human Vapor in 1960, and then finally we got The Secret of the Telegian. Now, what connected these movies was basically kind of a mostly they were movies about men who became ghostly, faded away, teleported, were invisible, something, and they all had a very similar backdrop of nightclubs, scientists' labs, detectives, and it was like mixing film noir with um with universal sci-fi of the 50s and 60s. So
This was actually very common too.
yeah,
Like, there's the mixture of these two genres. They seem, in theory, very disparate, but they actually fit together quite well.
no, they do. And the Insubstantial Man movies, they're all made by well, the ones from the 50s and 60s are made by uh Toho's Godzilla directors. And
I was going to ask a question about that actually.
mhm,
First one you mentioned, Oda was the
mhm.
name.
Yeah, he made
Did he ever?
Godzilla Raids Again.
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't. I recognized the a couple of the others. I hadn't recognized that one.
And Ishiro Honda, who made H-Man and Human Vapor, directed most of the Godzilla movies, including the original. And Jun Fukuda, who made our movie Secret of the Telegian, would go on to make stuff like Ebera, Godzilla vs. Megalon, the original Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla vs. Gigan. Um, and so while we think of Toho sci-fi in the West usually as these big spectacle movies, there were these movies, these Insubstantial Man movies, and others that kind of fit a smaller scale while still making use of special effects work from Eiji Tsuburaya and others. And like I said, these movies didn't weren't from an official line of movies, but they did get that Insubstantial Man kind of label, and they didn't last long. The Secret of the Telegian was the most expensive and the least successful, so it made it the last movie in this unofficial line. There was a planned sequel to this movie called The Telegraphed Man versus the Flame Man. That didn't come to be. Jun Fukuda recalls plans for the aborted sequel by just saying that he remembers that the movie had a transparent man versus a flame man. So basically the title.
I want to know, have you seen any of these beyond the Telegian?
Yes. Now I have not seen the invisible ones, Enter the Invisible Man or Invisible Avengers. Um, I have seen the Yushiro Honda movies, The H Man and The Human Vapor. The Human Vapor I don't remember as well, but The H Man, I really dig The H Man. It's a
It's
really
been on my list.
it's really cool mix of film noir and sci-fi radiation atomic era horror, you know. And no, it works, and it has a cool finale.
Is the title in reference to a hydrogen bomb?
Hmm.
I'm not surprised there,
Yeah.
especially considering what's actually really interesting about this whole era, both of going beyond just the Japanese, and
Hmm.
because they had Godzilla, but we come back and if we look at the stateside, like them came out what 1953, 52. It was just before, and like that was nuclear radiation. Like as soon as 1945 comes around, and we realize, oh shit, this
Hmm.
stuff is horrifying.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Slightly off topic, um, but I think it fits. Is the way that they use these movies. Yeah, it definitely fits because this movie, as we talked about, the way that it looks at the military past and sort of the idea of military honor, for one, very clearly highlights the Japanese war experience. And this is something that happened even in Godzilla, which very much,
Hmm.
yeah, you have a giant. I mean, I know I'm not telling you anything new, but you have a giant lizard who is a walking atom bomb. And I always think of that scene, which is changed in the American version, but the scene where the mother is with her
Oh yeah,
children, and
yeah, yeah.
it's so heartbreaking in the
It
Japanese
is.
version.
It is.
And in the American version, it still works, but they lessened it. They added a different music tone to it.
Hmm.
They really lessened it. But what's very interesting is that through these movies, to a degree, the Japanese are almost looking directly at the horrors that they faced and sometimes were a part of,
Yeah,
or not were part of, sorry, responsible for.
I sometimes
Not the
think of
bomb.
the golden age of Japanese sci-fi and fantasy films as sort of Japanese filmmakers working through a nation's grief with giant monsters, basically, and laser beams.
There is a book by Adam Lowenstein called Shock and Representations, and I don't remember if he looks at Japan specifically. I think that he looks at Onibaba as a way of understanding Hiroshima, actually.
Oh, interesting.
It looks at Japan, it looks at France, it looks at a few places, but what it talks about is the way that horror movies allowed people to work through their national trauma.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was just trying to say. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's true. And yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah, like you pointed out, and it's like, well, here's a scholar going, "Hey, Kel, you're right."
The original title of The Secret of the Telegian was Denso Ningen, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Oh, we were going to say that every single
Yes,
episode.
we are. The literal translation apparently is the electrically the, the literal translation is apparently the electrically transmitted man. The title that we got is The Secret of the Telegian. And you read something on explains the Telegian thing, or is that something you want to
Yes.
talk about?
So the Telegian, or the Secret of the Telegian, is purely the English title, and
Mhm.
as you just noted, like there's no real parallel in the Japanese title. But what it seems to come from is a derivative of the word telegraph, because here is a person. Now, at this time, we didn't have telegraph was pretty much our wireless communication over long distance, and so this person and that our villain is essentially sending a telegraph of himself out, And so it makes sense in a sort of reach around way, but I don't know if it's a really good title. For one, Telegian doesn't come up. It's never said. Nothing
It's
close to it is ever
it's
said.
not. It's not. Now, we watched the Japanese version of the film. It was dubbed, I believe, and released. Let me make sure about that. Yes, the film was dubbed and released directly to American television, and we don't know if it's ever referred to as the Telegian in that dubbed version or not.
There's a few things I want to hit on with this.
Hmm.
I It's very odd that why is there a teleporter? I understand that the doctor made it.
Yeah, I mean, the doctor was. They were trying to protect him at the end of the war and trying to move him to a safe location. So he was like important to the war effort and everything. So he was doing stuff that was, you know, powerful shit and everything. But at the same time, I hear what you're saying.
I
This
do. I
movie,
respect that he had the knowledge, but why did he do it?
no, it's. I mean, but he's driven by the need to know things. He's a scientist. But fair point, because basically the movie asks you to believe that this great scientist who's barely survived death goes into hiding and creates this awesome lab that creates a teleportation device, and basically the only person that makes use of it over 15 years since the war ended is a serial killer. So
Yeah, and
bit
obviously it
odd.
must have took some time to make, because why would he wait 15 years for it? They must have just been making it the whole time, and he was trying to figure out how to do it, like how to find his chance to enact his plan. Because as you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned it, the scientist doesn't know that his teleporter is being used for crime.
Hmm. Yeah.
It means he had to figure out, like, they had to take time to build it, and then he had to figure out how to hide the fact that he was using it from the doctor. So that must have took some time.
Yeah. Let's see what else.
Well, okay, here's a question, Kel.
Hmm.
Why was there a volcano?
Okay. The movie basically just throws up its hands at the end and says, "You know what? Show's over, folks. A volcano is nearby, and we're reminded more than once that it's an active volcano. This is going to be important later." And
I thought it was. I thought it was their base, but it turns out it's just near their base.
yeah, it's just near the film. There's a volcano disaster movie near our movie.
Yeah,
And
if you have a volcano and you're a mad scientist, make your fucking lab in the volcano.
And so, at the end, our telegraphed man, our Telegian, has killed everybody, and he's running back to his teleportation device so he can get back home. And the
Well,
volcano goes
he
off at the same time, and it
no no no
directs.
no 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 no. The volcano doesn't go off.
Oh,
He attacks the scientist, and the scientist pulls a self-destruct lever to initiate the scientist pulls a lever, and that causes the volcano to go off.
what the fuck, really?
Really? Yeah, because I just rewatched the ending. He pulls, so
Uh,
the telegraph man has a fight with the scientist, and the scientist pulls off
yeah.
his Mission
So our
Impossible face. He's scarred,
so
and the
our
scientist crawls over and pulls a fucking thing, and that does it.
so our morally righteous scientist who created this device that
Oh
accidentally
yeah,
gave a villain power decides the way to punish the villain is to set off a fucking volcano?
and kill thousands of people nearby.
Oh my fucking god.
Right?
And
That's
then,
the thing. Okay, the main point of the volcano going off. The key purpose narratively is that, okay, we have our guy, he's killed the bad guys, now he must die. How does he die? There's an accident in the teleporter.
yeah,
Well, how
yeah,
do you
and,
want to do that? Do
that's
you want
kind
to
of
do
a
it like
freaky idea. It's kind of a freaky idea to die in the teleporter. It gives you a whole lot of questions about the Star Trek teleportation thing, you know? But
but the thing too is, like, they could have shot at it, they could have hit it with a no no no.
any
Uh,
fucking
our
thing.
scientist sets off a volcano I'm
Oh
sorry.
fuck.
There's rocks flying. There's lava flying. Like I mean, it looks like a really great volcano made out of like
Yeah, yeah,
plaster. And they dumped a little bit of red food dye and some
yeah. Let's be nice.
vinegar and baking
Miniatures are
soda.
cool.
It does well. I mean, no. I really like. It's very clearly just a tiny made like a volcano that they just made. It's a miniature, but I adore it. I'm not in any way
Okay, all
insulting it.
right.
I'm saying
Yeah.
it's wonderful. But it starts shooting off, and obviously it's pressurized in there because they have a great blast off on it, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean in the prop, not in the
Yeah, yeah.
real thing, obviously. But it's spitting this shit, and it's got to be going far. And it's like, okay, your house was nearby. What else was nearby? Like, how many people you just doom just because you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna die. I guess it's time to pull the volcano switch.
And the thing is, though, the volcano goes off, our villain dies, credits.
Yeah,
That's
which
it. We don't see the aftermath of the volcano. We don't see anything. We don't see the
don't
aftermath of
see the end of
any of
the
this
love
shit.
affair.
It just
Like,
now,
we're like, oh, our character should be going back. Like, okay, they established a love interest. Our character never never you would expect like where's their last kiss or anything.
that character never mattered.
No, she really didn't, and she's only there to get kidnapped by a guy that has no reason to want to kidnap her.
It's a fair complaint. I love Toho science fiction movies. Actually, let me rephrase. I love Toho movies of this era. Okay, I just do. They're my thing. They're my shit.
No,
I
they're
was
good.
looking. I was looking forward to this movie very much. It did not live up to what I was hoping it would be. I still enjoyed it, probably more than you.
I actually like I liked it once I got past the point of going like, well, who is this? What are the like once I was
Yeah,
able to get past that and that, which I think this is one that if I watch again, I think the rewatch I'll really enjoy it.
but so much of it. Okay, this is the director's second film of his entire filmography. Jun
Oh,
Fukuda.
he did a good job then.
Yeah, so he went from this movie I've never heard of, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, to The Secret of the Telegian in 1960, and then it. This movie was not a success. I mentioned before it was the most expensive, least successful of the Insubstantial Man movies. But despite that, he still found a pretty good place in Toho, making genre pictures, and eventually graduated to Godzilla and stuff. He, for what it's worth, Fukuda was a grumpy man. He hated these movies. Now, I can't say that what he thought of this movie in particular, but he often spoke ill of his sci-fi movies. He didn't seem to hate his action movies, and he made some really fun ones. But he hated these movies, and I've always found that interesting looking at the Godzilla directors. And I don't want to get too far off and talk about Godzilla, but fuck it. Um, but compared to other Insubstantial Man movies, Ishiro Honda didn't want to be a sci-fi director, but he took joy in the making the movies,
Whereas this,
whereas this guy did not.
yeah,
And
Fukuda.
interestingly, both their careers kind of ended at the same time. I mean, Fukuda, his last film as a director was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla in the 70s, but uh,
Did he
but
die
he
around
no
that era, or did he
no
continue to
he
live?
died in year 2000.
Okay,
Um,
so he just retired from movies essentially.
yeah, pretty much. And the thing is though, Ishiro Honda, um, his final film as director was Terror of Mechagodzilla, the direct sequel to Fukuda's film. And and though Honda went on to become an assistant director to Akira Kurosawa later on, I've always found that mirror
Cool.
interesting. And and also, it's just there's a little bit of a darkness and an edge to Fukuda's movies, and I think you saw a little bit of it in this one, the stabbings and such.
Well, the stabbings and no, I'll get to that in a second.
But but this one feels a bit disjointed, and I'm not sure how much to put on Fukuda and how much to put on screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa, who I adore, made so many movies that I love. But the script for this one is kind of all over the place, doesn't give us really a character to you kind of connect with or follow.
There's no point of identification for the audience, and we jump between them too long to get that from anyone.
And the
And
cast,
actually, I don't think there's a single shot that is attributed to a character. I don't think we have a single eyeline match
mm,
for any of this.
that's a fair point. And the actors all do their job and basically show
Oh,
up and
I think that they did a wonderful job. I think that it's acted really well for being a sort like, I mean, it's still in that era where, everybody kind of talks with a bit of a more louder voice, like they're coming a bit more from the from their stomachs instead of just like speaking like they're projecting. That's the word I'm looking for.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that not horrible, not to the point of like a Shakespearean actor,
Hmm.
but there's still that clear sense of that era, which I really like that. Like people don't really talk like they do in this,
Mm-mm.
but it feels right.
Yeah, and the cast is made up of really a lot of familiar Toho faces. You got Koji Saruta as the reporter. Saizaburo Kawazu is the big bad guy, not the teleporting bad guy, but the bad guy that the teleporter wants to stab to death. Um, and then we got like Akihiko Harata and Yoshio Tsuchiya as the detectives. Tsuchiya is particularly wasted, but that's my opinion. And then you got other familiar faces like Sachio Sakai, and uh, it's cool to see a lot of these actors that you know from a lot of other movies, and but they're not the movie relies too much on you recognize that face, therefore that's the character, not building an actual character for the actor.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. I have a quick question. You mentioned that one of the actors was wasted. Was that the older of the?
The older of the detectives, Yoshio Tsuchiya, who's a great actor, bounced back and forth between sci-fi and Kurosawa, but here he's just kind of there.
So Kel, I want to. We've talked a lot on negatives. I want to touch on one thing that I really like about the film.
Hmm.
It does really well is actually the effect of the Telegian itself is this very interesting sort of. It's like a TV signal almost,
Yeah, no, I really
and the
liked that.
scenes in which he is attacking people are really well shot, and they're really there gets into a couple moments where like when they're chasing him through the streets, it doesn't have the energy it thinks it does.
Mm-mm.
But when they take him and they put him into you put him into a cave or you put him into an apartment and he goes like jumping out the window, like all of those moments work really well.
Yeah, and the special effects work by Eiji Tsuburaya it was cool. I liked that, and that dude is always jumping out the window, and it was fun.
He really really liked going through windows.
Yeah, but he
It
wasn't
was like
always good
watching
at it,
television
which I admire.
No, no, he wasn't. He was really bad at points.
Yeah, yeah. There's this one part where he jumps out, and it's like the frame kind of catches him, and he kind of goes out sideways, and it's like, oh my god, they didn't do a second take. I loved them for that.
Of course they didn't. He probably broke his fucking hip. That was probably the last day of shooting, and they're like, "Shit, okay, we can't let people know that this is a different guy." Oh, I know. We'll put scars on his face, and then we'll use a digital effect. Turns out that wasn't part of the. It wasn't going to be part of it. It was like, shit. It's like when you get to Empire Strikes Back, and you're like, "Wait, what? What do you mean Luke fucked his face up?" Oh, I know. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fuck, he got caught in the blizzard. Fuck it. Um,
There's a fucking Yeti. I don't know. What else is in the snow? But no, it really does have like when he is on screen being menacing, he
mhm.
is very menacing.
Yeah, no, I like I say, I like this movie. It is not great. I do like it though, and
Oh,
the killer when he's killing is really a good villain, and I wish the movie had a little bit more rampage and a little bit less detective work.
There was one thing that still does confuse me about it,
Just
which
one?
you might be able to clear. There's just one thing which I think might be able to be answered that confuses me about it, which is there was an idea that that our killer was able to both like be in two places at once somehow. Did he actually have a hologram of himself or something? Because there was an idea that he would teleport himself to a murder scene while also being present with the doctor. And
Yeah,
like he had a way of covering up for himself that made no fucking sense to me.
yeah, I have no answer for that.
It felt well the way the movie like it's in one scene that they go, oh, so that's how you're able to do the thing, but they don't go like, hey, here's the thing, here's the method. Like they don't really show you it, they just tell you it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is the problem that I had with this era in general. Not so much the Japanese movies, but the American movies of this era, big time.
yeah. A lot of them, I remember thinking, it's like it's telling us the cool stuff instead of showing it. But whatever.
Yeah. Which though, like the Japanese, they're like, yeah, there's a giant fucking lizard on the screen. What mode do you want?
So, do we have anything more to say about this one? Really?
Let me see.
I think.
I do want to kind of highlight how much I like that beginning with the Cave of Horrors.
Yeah.
The editing for it is so like it's so weird that you don't know what happened at first. This
Yeah.
person
No, it
appears.
is. It is strange. Yeah.
Don't really know. You're like, wait, what just happened? And then this guy walks
Mm-hmm.
out with a knife in his gut. And you had told me that it was an Invisible Man movie, which makes sense considering that it's part of this Insubstantial Man or
Yeah. Whatever it is.
subgenre. But
I was wrong.
yeah, no, you were wrong. But it made that scene even more confusing in a way that was actually kind of like enjoyable, where it was like, wait, what? Whoa, I can
What
see him.
just
Okay.
happened? Yeah.
And like for the start of your movie, it's got also it has two very beautiful Japanese women who are like getting terrified going in with our guy about to be killed too, and they are given some of the best fear responses to a not scary thing at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are when the knife happens, when the murder happens, it's like, okay, yep, that's the time to be scared. But like a bat or something goes out, like
Mm-hmm.
really really low
Yeah.
scare,
Yeah.
like low threshold.
Yeah. It's like them reacting to this PG haunted house attraction, and they're just freaking out.
Yeah. They look like nowadays we have like the extreme haunted houses where they'll like fucking bury you in the ground, and they look like they're going through one of those, like how strong their reaction is. Um, and then as every you mentioned this just before recording, but after the guy gets stabbed, all the people start running out, and like the ticket guy's like, "Oh no, they're people. It's no nothing harms you. It's all in fun." But
Yeah.
then the costumed people come out and they're like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god."
Yeah, yeah. People involved with the ride are like freaking out because hey, we just saw somebody get stabbed. Yeah, it's a
It's
fun
really
opening. It
strong.
is. You don't know what the fuck is going on, but it's fun and it grabs you.
Then later, when you know what the fuck's going on, you're like, "I okay." How'd
Yeah.
he know that? What was did he send that guy a note too?
Yes, he did. He said meet me here, and the guy
Okay,
was like,
that makes
all right,
sense then. 'Cause
yeah,
I was just- why did he pick? Did our killer just like really want to go to the fair? So he's like, "I'll meet you there, and then I'll get the Ferris wheel and be over."
I have no idea why he picked that. No, but
You don't know. No, do you know why he picked it? Because it would make for an interesting location,
mm,
and because they did not choose a ride for one. There's no mechanical thing going through this like you see in say the Funhouse.
hmm
They chose a cave of horrors because it costs approximately $5 to make a cave, which I'm actually okay with because they didn't use it to death. It's perfectly and the fact that it
yeah,
itself is a attraction, so looking cheap makes perfect sense.
and
So
and
I think
and for what it's worth, I mean, it's probably not intentional, but there was a cave involved with their past meeting where they left him for dead in the cave.
No,
So,
you know what? That was probably intentional, actually.
all right, well then there you go.
You know what? I could 100% see that. Murdered in a cave, no. You know what? That's too perfect mirroring. I'm going to put my money down that was intentional.
There we go then.
Yeah, this is a movie. It has grown more in my mind. The biggest problem though is just like the best parts of it have a lot of sort of downtime between them.
They do. I will agree with that. And there's too many characters and too little going on at the same time. It's a strange mix, but it
A good
it's
background movie though, like a hangout movie.
and it's kind of a shame that it doesn't have an official release in the West.
Yeah,
And because it's not bad, it's a fun movie of the era, and I think that people who like Toho science fiction horror movies of the era will dig it. Whether or not if you are strictly a fan of J horror or horror movies in general, I'm not sure that this is going to have a whole lot for you. It's not a scary movie. It is. I would classify it as a sci-fi horror movie, but
it does get dark. Like it does get like mean and sadistic enough in those
yeah,
in
sure it
those
does.
moments.
Yeah,
Like absolutely, it does.
yeah, but it's older, and it pulls some punches, and the ending doesn't make any sense. But
But I think that what you're trying to say is, hey, Arrow, release the Insubstantial Man on Blu-ray. Wouldn't that be a great set?
yeah, no, absolutely. The Invisible Man movies that I haven't seen, H-Man, Human Vapor, fuck, yeah, I would buy that in a heartbeat.
That would be a great box set. Arrow, pay me. I should be coming up with your releases. Not actually though. You do a great job.
You do. We love you.
I'm a big fan of you. So, Kelly? Do you have anything else left on this one?
Not really. I feel like we covered most everything we need to cover on this one. It's a decent film. It has issues, and we went through them.
And the volcano.
Uh,
I wish this was a video podcast so I could just end with a volcano blowing up. Sound effects just won't be quite so good.
And so, what's on tap next week?
Well, next week is my choice, so I want to turn our attention over to one of my favorite filmmakers, Sono. And I want to watch a film I haven't seen before, specifically Guilty of Romance, which has a
I've not seen that either.
fantastic trailer.
Okay.
I love the trailer for this movie, and it does what I'm sure we'll get into it, but it does what Sono does best by maybe you know what, I actually haven't seen it, so I can't say for sure, but it's based on a real event, and I'm going to bet that he spins it off because that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, cold fish and such.
That one I don't know my thoughts on fully because it's a little bit odd, the ending on that one, but
Yeah.
I appreciate the idea of going, okay, here's a real event. It's based, like, he doesn't say this is a true story or what. He does say based on, which is very true. So we'll look into. I'll take a look into the case that Guilty of Romance was based on, and we'll have a fun time exploring one of Japan's most active provocateurs, to the point that the man had a heart attack 2 years ago and was back on the set like 3 days later. Probably less. Let's be real, probably less, because he was doing the Tokyo Vampire Hotel and had a heart attack, and also did like 2 movies that year.
The man's insane. I mean, I admire the fuck out of him.
Me too.